In the heart of California, beneath the sunshine and glamour, lies a darker history. These are places where life once clung desperately to hope, where hospitals promised healing but delivered despair. Here, in abandoned wards and crumbling wings, whispers still echo. Whispers of footsteps, of cries for help, of souls that could never leave. Tonight we walk into those forgotten halls. We descend into the shadowed corners of 15 of the most haunted hospitals in California. Each site carries not only the weight of tragedy, but the presence of something unseen, something that lingers still. Stay until the end, for the #1 most haunted hospital on this list will test the limits of what you believe is possible. Its reputation alone chills even the bravest of ghost hunters, and its story is one you will not forget. So now, let us begin. Number 15. The Vallejo Naval and Marine Hospital. Vallejo, long before Vallejo was known for its naval shipyards, it housed the state's oldest marine hospital, first built in 1850. Here, sailors and immigrants stricken with yellow fever, cholera, and tuberculosis were treated in bleak, crowded wards. But treatment in the 19th century was more often a slow wait for death than a true chance of survival. Hundreds died here, their bodies shrouded and carried out before dawn. Families were rarely notified, and in many cases, patients were buried in unmarked graves on the surrounding land. The hospital's reputation grew grim, whispered about even during its years of operation as a place of suffering. Today, the building has been transformed into a museum, yet its shadows remain restless. Staff members report sudden cold drafts that swirl without explanation, and visitors tell of pale figures glimpsed at the top of staircases. The sound most often recounted is coughing, persistent, hacking coughs that echo in empty rooms. A local guide once admitted that, while locking up for the night, he saw a man in a tattered navy coat leaning against the wall. When he stepped closer, the man simply dissolved, leaving only silence behind. Many believe these lingering spirits are the forgotten sailors who died far from home, their final cries unanswered. The Vallejo Naval Hospital stands as a reminder: when death outnumbers hope, despair will never rest. Number 14. Agnew State Hospital, San Jose. Opened in 1885, Agnew State Hospital was built as a psychiatric institution on the edge of San Jose. It was hailed as progressive at the time, but the treatments were anything but humane. Patients endured isolation, electroshock, and primitive experiments that stripped away dignity and sanity alike. The hospital's history is marked by one of California's greatest tragedies. In 1906, the Great San Francisco earthquake struck with violent force, and Agnew's collapsed. Over 100 patients and staff were killed instantly, crushed beneath the falling brick and iron. For those who survived, the cries of the trapped and dying haunted the grounds for days. When the hospital was rebuilt, new patients filled its wards, but death never truly left. Reports spread of ghostly figures wandering the corridors, their faces blurred, their bodies twisted in impossible ways. Some say the spirits of those who perished in the earthquake still stagger through the ruins, endlessly searching for escape. Locals claim that late at night near the original foundations, voices can be heard calling out. Some are frantic, screaming for help. Others are soft, murmuring prayers as though awaiting rescue that never came. Security guards who once patrolled the grounds spoke of doors slamming shut, followed by the unmistakable sound of sobbing in the dark. One chilling story comes from a nurse who worked there in the 1950s. She told of hearing footsteps pacing the empty women's ward, long after visiting hours had ended. When she went to investigate, she saw the faint outline of a woman in a hospital gown. The figure's face was obscured, and as the nurse drew closer, it simply faded into the wall. Agnew's closed its doors in 1998, but its grounds are said to remain haunted to this day. The earthquake victims, the tortured patients, and the countless forgotten souls are believed to wander still, tethered to the ruins of their suffering. 2 hospitals down, and 13 still to uncover. Each one darker, each one more unsettling than the last. If you thought sailors' whispers and earthquake shadows were disturbing, what waits ahead will leave you questioning whether hospitals heal, or whether some wounds can never be closed. On the quiet outskirts of Talmadge once stood Mendocino State Hospital, founded in 1893. It began as an asylum for the mentally ill, part of a growing network of state-run facilities. The goal was treatment, but history tells us the reality was far grimmer. By the 1930s, the hospital had swelled with thousands of patients, many committed against their will. Treatments included ice baths, straitjackets, and primitive shock therapies. Whispers of mistreatment and abuse circulated for decades, yet the patients had no voice. The asylum also became home to criminally insane patients transferred from San Quentin and Folsom. Among them were murderers and violent offenders, housed side by side with the mentally ill. The line between punishment and care blurred, leaving scars that would never heal. It is said that hundreds died behind its locked doors. Some passed quietly, but others met violent ends. Suicides, assaults, unexplained disappearances. Bodies were buried in the hospital cemetery, most in graves marked only with numbers. Locals who venture near the old grounds speak of hearing screams in the night, echoing across the empty fields. Dark figures appear at the edges of vision, only to vanish when approached. Some claim to feel a crushing weight, as though unseen hands are pressing down upon them. Former employees tell stories of wards where lights flickered constantly, and of wheelchairs moving on their own in deserted hallways. One doctor recalled entering a locked patient room to find claw marks etched deep into the plaster walls, yet the patient inside had no fingernails left to scratch. Another nurse swore she heard a voice calling her name, though the ward was empty. The hospital was closed in 1972, its buildings abandoned to decay. But even now, those who pass by the overgrown remains say they feel watched. The asylum may be gone, but the echoes of its suffering linger, clinging to the soil itself. Mendocino State Hospital stands as a monument to despair, and to the restless spirits who never escaped its grasp. Number 12. Napa State Hospital, Napa. Not far from the vineyards and rolling hills of Napa lies another institution with a chilling past. Napa State Hospital opened in 1875 as an asylum for the insane. Its grand brick structures and sprawling grounds mask the misery within. In its earliest years, patients lived in overcrowded wards, often in chains. Treatments were crude, ranging from cold water therapies to experimental drugs, and for many, confinement was a life sentence. The 20th century brought even darker chapters. By the 1940s, Napa housed over 5,000 patients, many subjected to lobotomies and shock therapy. The asylum's reputation grew notorious, whispered about by locals who feared what went on inside. The hospital has also been the scene of violence. Patients have attacked staff, sometimes fatally, while others turned on themselves. In one chilling case, a patient vanished entirely, never to be found, despite searches of the entire grounds. Stories of the paranormal soon followed. Visitors and staff reported disembodied voices calling from the tunnels beneath the hospital. Doors would slam without warning, and cold spots appeared in rooms where patients had died. One former orderly described hearing laughter echoing down the men's ward at midnight. When he followed the sound, he found the ward empty, every door locked tight. He resigned the next morning, unwilling to return. The hospital cemetery holds over 1,000 graves, most unmarked. Those buried there were forgotten by families, left to anonymity. Some believe the spirits of these neglected souls still wander, desperate to be remembered. Even today, Napa State Hospital continues to function, but its haunted reputation has not faded. Staff speak in hushed tones of shadows gliding through hallways, or sudden chills that stop them in their tracks, and the tunnels beneath remain a place few dare to enter alone. For those who know its history, Napa is not merely a hospital. It is a threshold between the living and the dead, where echoes of centuries past still whisper through the walls. 2 more names have been added to our list, each carrying stories of cruelty, despair, and lingering phantoms. But we are only at number 12. As we move deeper into California's haunted hospitals, the stories will grow darker and the spirits more restless. Number 11. Stockton State Hospital. Stockton opened in 1851. Stockton State Hospital was California's first public psychiatric institution. It began with hopeful intentions, but quickly became overwhelmed by the sheer number of patients committed within its walls. From the very beginning, it carried an air of hopelessness. The early wards were overcrowded, often housing 2 or 3 patients to a bed. Violent and non-violent patients were forced to live together, creating chaos and despair. Treatment often meant little more than confinement, and discipline was harsh. Reports of abuse surfaced throughout its history. Patients were chained in basements, left in darkness for days at a time. Others were subjected to experimental cures that left them broken, both physically and mentally. The hospital's cemetery tells its own story. Thousands of patients were buried there, most in unmarked graves. No names, no memorials, just numbers etched on simple markers, many of which have since been lost to time. Visitors to the grounds speak of overwhelming sorrow. They describe hearing faint voices in the wind or seeing silhouettes wandering between the trees where the cemetery once spread wide. One former employee recalled seeing a woman in white walking along the old path to the chapel. When he hurried after her, she disappeared into thin air. Another chilling tale involves the old surgical wing. Explorers who managed to enter after its closure claimed to hear the clatter of surgical instruments echoing down the hall. Yet the room stood empty, layered in dust. Some even swear they heard muffled screams, as though a patient were enduring a long-forgotten procedure. By the time Stockton State Hospital closed in the late 1990s, its haunted reputation was well established. Locals still whisper of the restless spirits that roam the grounds, tied forever to a place that was meant to heal, but only deepened their suffering. Number 10. Modesto State Hospital, Modesto in the Central Valley. Another hospital carries a reputation for both tragedy and haunting. Modesto State Hospital, founded in the early 20th century, was intended to relieve the overcrowding of larger institutions. Instead, it became infamous in its own right. Life inside was harsh. Patients often spent years in barren wards, isolated from the outside world. Medical practices ranged from the experimental to the cruel. Electric shocks, forced labor, and even sterilizations were carried out in the name of progress. Stories of unexplained deaths were common. Some patients slipped away quietly in the night, but others died suddenly, with no cause ever recorded. Staff turnover was high, and rumors of abuse were whispered in Modesto for decades. The hospital's darker reputation, however, comes from its ghostly tales. Those who have visited after hours speak of lights flickering on and off in abandoned rooms. Shadows glide along the walls, and cold drafts sweep through the corridors with no explanation. One chilling account comes from a night guard who patrolled the grounds in the 1970s. He told of hearing footsteps trailing behind him as he walked the old men's ward. When he turned, no one was there, but the steps continued, closing in until he fled the building. Others describe a figure known locally as the patient. This apparition is said to be a tall, gaunt man in a hospital gown who appears at the end of hallways and then vanishes without a trace. Some claim he follows intruders out of the building, lingering in the parking lot before dissolving into the night air. The cemetery attached to Modesto State Hospital adds to its eerie aura. Graves lie in uneven rows, many unmarked, the identities of the dead lost forever. Visitors walking among them report an overwhelming feeling of dread, as though unseen eyes are watching from every side. Though the hospital closed decades ago, its legend endures. For locals, Modesto is more than a relic of medical history. It is a place where the line between life and death has blurred, and where the patient's cries may still echo on the wind. We are now 5 hospitals into our journey. Already the stories grow heavier, the hauntings more vivid, the sorrow more palpable. And yet, with 9 more hospitals to go, the darkest and most terrifying tales still lie ahead. Number 9. Patton State Hospital, San Bernardino. Founded in 1893, Patton State Hospital was built at the foot of the San Bernardino Mountains. Originally called the Highland Insane Asylum, it was designed to house 1,000 patients, but within decades the number doubled. The result was overcrowding, desperation, and despair. Patton's reputation was marred by scandal. During the 20th century, the hospital became notorious for forced sterilizations under California's eugenics program. Patients deemed unfit were permanently altered without their consent, their futures stolen in sterile rooms. For many, Patton became less a place of healing and more a place of punishment. The grounds of the hospital are vast, filled with courtyards, tunnels, and wards that seem to stretch endlessly. Staff have long whispered of strange activity in these spaces. Some report the sensation of being watched in empty corridors, while others hear footsteps pacing the floors above them when no one is there. One former nurse told the story of a locked ward where the lights flickered every evening at the same hour. Electrical checks revealed no fault, yet the flickering continued for years. She swore she once saw a man in a hospital gown standing beneath the swinging light bulb, his face hidden, until he vanished before her eyes. Security officers describe hearing the clang of metal doors slamming shut, though all the doors remained bolted open. Others speak of screams erupting suddenly from the empty isolation cells, so piercing they left the staff shaken for hours afterward. Perhaps most unsettling are the tales of the hospital's cemetery. Thousands of patients who died at Patton were buried here, their graves marked only by numbers. Many locals believe their unrest fuels the hauntings that plague the hospital to this day. Patton remains operational, housing patients even now. But those who work within its walls admit there are places they will not walk alone, even in daylight. The past is never far behind, and at Patton, it feels as though the shadows themselves are alive. Number 8. Los Angeles County General Hospital, Los Angeles. Towering over Boyle Heights, the Los Angeles County General Hospital opened its doors in 1933. It was one of the largest medical facilities in the world at the time, a symbol of modern medicine and progress. Yet within its walls, countless tragedies unfolded. The hospital became the site of thousands of emergency cases, from car accidents to violent crimes. The sheer number of deaths that passed through its trauma wards left a heavy imprint on the building. Generations of doctors and nurses carried the weight of what they had witnessed. But it is the ghost stories that make County General infamous. Staff working night shifts have long reported hearing the squeak of gurney wheels in deserted hallways. Others describe phantom cries from the maternity ward, where mothers once labored in desperation. One chilling account comes from a surgeon who, while walking down a corridor, saw a man in a hospital gown limping ahead of him. The figure turned into a room. When the doctor followed, he found the room empty, the bed sheets untouched. Another story tells of a woman in white who appears in the stairwells. She is said to glide silently upward before fading into the shadows. Some believe she was a patient who died during childbirth, forever searching for the child she never held. The morgue beneath the hospital adds yet another layer to its legend. Medical staff have described feelings of dread when entering, and some refuse to go down alone. Doors have been known to open on their own, and drawers slide out without a hand to guide them. Even after parts of the hospital were closed and newer facilities built, the old tower still looms. Explorers who managed to sneak inside speak of cold winds sweeping through sealed rooms and the eerie sensation of unseen eyes following their every move. For Los Angeles, County General is more than a hospital. It is a place where the sheer volume of suffering has created echoes that refuse to fade. Those who have worked its halls know that even the brightest lights cannot drive out the shadows completely. 9 through 8, both sprawling institutions, both steeped in stories of pain, loss, and spectral presences that cannot be explained. But as our countdown continues, the hauntings will grow more vivid, and the histories more sinister. Ahead lie hospitals where death was not only common, but constant, and where the living and the dead still seem to share the same halls. Number 7. Camarillo State Hospital. Camarillo State Hospital opened in 1936 on the outskirts of Ventura County. Built during the Great Depression, it was designed to hold thousands of patients suffering from mental illness. Its vast grounds stretched over 1,000 acres, and at its peak, it became one of the largest psychiatric institutions in the United States. At first, Camarillo was hailed as progressive, offering new methods of treatment. But as years passed, stories of neglect and abuse began to surface. Overcrowding grew severe, and patients often lived in deplorable conditions. Lobotomies, shock therapy, and heavy sedation became the standard, leaving many patients broken and voiceless. The sheer scale of the hospital made it a city unto itself. It had its own fire department, dairy, farm, and even a jail. But beneath the surface, suffering thrived in silence. Generations of families whispered warnings about Camarillo, calling it a place where people disappeared. The hauntings are as expansive as the grounds themselves. Visitors report the sound of children's laughter echoing in abandoned halls, though the children's ward has been empty for decades. Cold breezes sweep through sealed rooms, and shadows dart across walls where no one stands. One story that repeats often is that of a woman seen near the old tuberculosis ward. She appears in a hospital gown, her face obscured, her figure pale as smoke. Witnesses claim she turns as if to speak, only to dissolve into thin air. Staff who worked the night shift spoke of hearing doors slamming in distant corridors. Some described the sound of footsteps pacing back and forth outside their offices, yet when they looked, the hallways were silent and still. Others refused to enter the basements at all, claiming an overwhelming sense of dread pressed against them in the darkness. Camarillo closed in 1997, and today the California State University Channel Islands campus stands on its grounds. Students and faculty alike tell of eerie encounters, lights switching on in locked classrooms, whispers in stairwells, and apparitions wandering the old hospital wings repurposed into lecture halls. The transformation from asylum to university did not drive away the spirits. If anything, the stories have only multiplied, as though the echoes of the past refuse to yield to the future. Camarillo State Hospital remains one of California's most enduring haunted sites, a place where thousands of restless voices still call out, unheard but never absent. Number 6, Downey Insane Asylum. Downey, hidden in Southern California's sprawl, once stood the Downey Insane Asylum, later renamed Rancho Los Amigos Hospital. Founded in the late 1800s, it began as a poor farm before evolving into a facility for the mentally ill and physically disabled. The asylum soon gained a grim reputation, one that has never faded. The wards were crowded and underfunded. Patients, many of them destitute, lived in conditions that would be condemned today. Isolation cells, crude restraints, and neglect were common, and countless lives ended quietly within its walls. One of the darkest chapters in Downey's history lies in its forgotten cemetery. Hundreds of patients were buried in unmarked graves, their names lost to history. The anonymity of their deaths gave rise to the belief that their spirits never left the grounds. When the asylum expanded into Rancho Los Amigos Hospital, its darker reputation only grew. Legends tell of shadow figures roaming the hallways at night, accompanied by whispers too faint to understand. Former staff described the eerie sensation of being followed as they made their rounds, though no one else was present. One chilling tale involves the old laundry building, where workers claimed to hear the cries of children echoing late into the night. Yet no children were ever housed in that part of the facility. Explorers who entered after the hospital closed recounted seeing faces pressed against broken windows, only to vanish when approached. The most notorious stories come from the underground tunnels. Built to connect different wings of the hospital, these tunnels are said to be the epicenter of paranormal activity. People who entered often reported sudden drops in temperature and the feeling of unseen hands brushing against their skin. Some fled in panic after hearing voices whisper their names in the dark. Though much of the hospital now lies abandoned, the stories have not stopped. Locals speak of strange lights flickering across the ruins at night, and ghost hunters claim to have captured unexplained sounds on their recordings. Downey remains a place of fascination and dread, a reminder that not all spirits rest easily. We have now reached the halfway point of our journey. 7 hospitals have revealed their secrets, and each has grown darker, more disturbing than the last. But ahead lie the final 5, sites of tragedy so profound and hauntings so chilling that they have cemented their place in California's darkest history. Number 5. Pacific State Hospital, Pomona. In 1927, the state of California opened Pacific State Hospital in Pomona. Its mission was to house the developmentally disabled, but in practice, it became a place of confinement, overcrowding, and despair. Thousands of men, women, and children lived here, many for their entire lives. Over the decades, Pacific State became infamous for its conditions. Patients endured neglect, overmedication, and harsh treatment at the hands of overwhelmed staff. Investigations in the mid-20th century revealed shocking stories of abuse. Children were strapped to beds, patients were restrained for days, and medical experiments were rumored to have taken place in secret. The hospital's history is riddled with death. Tuberculosis, influenza, and other outbreaks swept through the wards, claiming countless lives. Many of the dead were buried on the property itself, their graves unmarked, their identities forgotten. It is little wonder, then, that the site grew a reputation for hauntings. Those who ventured into the hospital after its closure spoke of eerie encounters. Whispers carried through empty rooms, and doors opened and closed as though guided by unseen hands. Some described the sound of children crying in the night, their voices faint yet piercing, echoing across the deserted wards. One story tells of a nurse who worked in the children's wing in the 1950s. She swore she often saw a small boy standing at the end of the hall, his gown too large, his eyes downcast. When she approached, he would vanish into the wall. She carried that memory with her until the day she died, convinced the child was one of the forgotten souls left behind. Paranormal investigators who visited Pacific State captured unexplained recordings, voices calling for help, or simply whispering words no one could understand. Several reported sudden drops in temperature, and some even fled in fear after seeing shadowy figures moving through the halls. Though the hospital no longer operates under its original name, the stories of Pacific State remain etched into Pomona's history. For many, it symbolizes the darkest side of institutional care, where lives were lost not only to illness, but to neglect. And in those silent corridors, the voices of the forgotten are said to linger still. Number 4. Queen of Angels Hospital, Los Angeles. Rising above Los Angeles in 1926, the Queen of Angels Hospital was once a symbol of Catholic charity and medical progress. Its Spanish-style architecture and towering presence made it one of the city's most recognizable landmarks. But behind the grandeur lay stories that would soon weave it into the fabric of haunted California. For decades, the hospital served thousands of patients. It saw births, recoveries, and miracles, but also countless deaths. Its emergency rooms were filled with accident victims, its wards with the terminally ill, and its morgue with the city's forgotten. The combination of tragedy and faith gave the hospital a strange aura, one that many still feel today. When Queen of Angels closed its doors in 1989, the building was left eerily still, but almost immediately stories began to circulate of ghostly activity. Security guards spoke of hearing footsteps echo through the empty halls. Others claimed to see robed nuns gliding silently down the staircases, their faces hidden in shadow. One particularly chilling tale comes from a film crew. The hospital was often used as a filming location after its closure, but many crews reported strange experiences. Lights would flicker, equipment malfunctioned, and cold drafts swept through sealed rooms. Several actors described seeing shadowy figures standing at the edges of their vision, only to vanish when confronted. The maternity ward is said to be one of the most haunted parts of the hospital. Visitors tell of phantom cries of newborns, and some claim to have seen nurses tending to invisible patients. One caretaker recalled walking past an empty room when he suddenly heard the sound of lullabies being sung softly in Spanish. When he opened the door, the room was empty. The chapel remains another focal point of paranormal reports. Candles that had been extinguished were found lit again. The scent of incense lingers in the air, though no services have been held there for decades. Some believe that the spirits of nuns and priests continue their work, tending to souls even in death. Today, Queen of Angels is partially repurposed, but the stories of hauntings have not faded. Its long corridors, ornate staircases, and shadowed chapels remain steeped in mystery. For many, the Queen of Angels stands not only as a monument of faith and medicine, but also as one of Los Angeles's most haunted relics. We now stand at the threshold of the final 3. These last hospitals are the darkest, the most terrifying, and the most documented in California's haunted history. They are places where history, tragedy, and the supernatural intertwine so completely that the walls themselves seem alive with memory. If the stories we've heard so far have chilled you, prepare yourself, for the top 3 will shake you to the core. Number 3. Linda Vista Community Hospital, Los Angeles. At the edge of Boyle Heights in East Los Angeles stands a building that has terrified generations, Linda Vista Community Hospital. Opened in 1905 as the Santa Fe Coast Lines Hospital, it was originally built to treat injured railroad workers. What began as a place of recovery soon became one of the most notorious haunted sites in California. By the mid-20th century, Linda Vista had transformed into a community hospital serving the surrounding neighborhoods. But with poverty rising and crime escalating, the hospital grew overwhelmed. The emergency rooms were flooded with victims of stabbings, shootings, and accidents. Tragedy became a daily occurrence, and the walls of Linda Vista absorbed it all. As medicine advanced, larger hospitals drew patients away, leaving Linda Vista with fewer resources. By the 1980s, it had gained a grim reputation as a place of death rather than healing. Patients were said to fear being sent there, convinced they would not leave alive. In 1991, the hospital closed its doors for good, but its story was far from over. The hauntings began almost immediately. Security guards tasked with watching the abandoned building reported strange sounds, footsteps echoing in empty hallways, whispers in deserted wards, and the distant squeak of gurney wheels rolling through the night. Lights flickered on and off without power, and shadows glided across walls as though the hospital was still alive with activity. One of the most famous apparitions is said to be a young girl. She appears on the third floor, dressed in a hospital gown, her hair falling over her face. Witnesses claim she sometimes holds a ball, rolling it slowly along the floor before disappearing into the darkness. Others describe her as simply watching from doorways, silent and unmoving, until she vanishes. Another recurring figure is that of a nurse named Martha, who supposedly worked at Linda Vista in the 1940s. She is said to appear in the surgical ward, tending to invisible patients. Several investigators swear they saw her standing at the end of a hallway, only for her to fade away the moment they called out. Locals believe she is still on duty, forever bound to her hospital. Linda Vista has become a magnet for paranormal investigators and filmmakers alike. Shows such as Ghost Adventures and The Ghost Hunters filmed episodes here, capturing strange phenomena that added to its reputation. Thermal cameras recorded unexplained cold spots moving through rooms. Electronic voice phenomena, disembodied voices were captured, calling out words like leave and help. One team reported hearing the distinct sound of a child laughing, followed by a ball rolling across the floor. Another described feeling a hand brush against their shoulder in an empty hallway. Several investigators fled the building in terror after hearing screams echo through the morgue. The surgical suites are said to be among the most haunted parts of Linda Vista. Explorers describe hearing metallic clinks, as though surgical instruments are still being laid out. Some claim to have seen figures in surgical masks standing motionless in the corners, vanishing when approached. The atmosphere is so oppressive that many refuse to step inside. The basement is another source of countless stories. Dark, damp, and filled with shadows, it was once used for storage and utilities. Now it is said to be home to something darker. Visitors report feelings of being watched, sudden chills, and even the sound of growling, low and guttural, coming from the shadows. But perhaps the most unnerving stories come from those who entered the hospital alone. One urban explorer recalled hearing footsteps pacing behind him. When he turned, the hallway was empty. Moments later, he felt a breath on the back of his neck, though he stood in silence, entirely alone. He left that night and swore never to return. Despite its abandonment, Linda Vista lives on as a filming location. Countless movies and TV shows have used its eerie halls as a backdrop. But even hardened crew members admit they sometimes felt uneasy, as if they were not alone. Several productions reported sudden malfunctions with cameras and lights, only for the equipment to work perfectly once outside. The building itself seems to resist silence. Its walls groan, its doors creak, and its stairwells echo with phantom steps. Those who have dared to spend the night inside say it feels as though the hospital itself is breathing, watching, waiting. Today, Linda Vista Community Hospital stands partially repurposed, with parts of the building converted into affordable housing. Yet even with new life brought to its walls, the legends have not died. Residents and visitors still whisper of strange sounds in the night, fleeting figures in the hallways, and the overwhelming sense that the dead have not yet left. For many, Linda Vista is more than just a haunted hospital. It is a symbol of how despair and tragedy can stain a place so deeply that even time cannot cleanse it. It ranks among the most infamous haunted locations in the state, an institution where the cries of the past still echo, refusing to fade. 3 hospitals remain. If Linda Vista's restless spirits chilled you, prepare for what lies ahead. The final 2 hospitals are darker still, with histories steeped in tragedy and hauntings that have shaken even the most seasoned investigators. The next chapter of our journey will bring us closer to the very heart of California's haunted legacy. Number 2. Napa State Hospital, Napa Valley. In the heart of California, wine country, lies a place whose history is far darker than its scenic surroundings suggest. Founded in 1875, Napa State Hospital was built to house the mentally ill, designed as part of the 19th century movement toward massive asylums. Its original intent was treatment, rest, and rehabilitation, but what followed was a legacy of suffering, overcrowding, and tragedy. The hospital was once one of the largest mental health facilities in the state. At its peak, it held more than 5,000 patients, men, women, and children struggling with illnesses that medicine at the time could barely understand. Overcrowding quickly became a problem. Patients were crammed into wards, neglected, and subjected to harsh practices. Treatments in the early years were primitive at best, cruel at worst. Electroshock therapy, hydrotherapy baths, and insulin coma treatments were common. Lobotomies were performed on patients deemed incurable. The grounds, meant to be a sanctuary, became instead a prison of despair. Death was no stranger to Napa State. Disease outbreaks swept through its crowded wards, claiming hundreds of lives. Many of the deceased were buried on site, their graves unmarked, their names erased from history. To this day, a cemetery on the hospital grounds holds thousands of patients who were forgotten by their families and society. It is little surprise, then, that stories of hauntings soon emerged. Staff, patients, and later visitors all reported strange occurrences. Dark shadows moving across walls, voices calling out in empty corridors, and sudden icy chills that froze the blood. The atmosphere was heavy, thick with the weight of sorrow and suffering. One of the most commonly reported apparitions is that of a woman in white. She is said to wander the old female ward, weeping softly. Witnesses describe her as translucent, her face obscured by her long hair. Some believe she was a patient who took her own life after years of confinement. Another recurring legend tells of a man in restraints. Visitors have seen him stumbling down the halls, his arms bound, his mouth open in a silent scream. He vanishes when approached, leaving only the faint sound of chains rattling in the dark. Staff working night shifts often reported eerie experiences. Some heard the sound of doors slamming and locked wings. Others described hearing footsteps pacing the hallways, even when they were entirely alone. One nurse recalled seeing a figure standing at the end of a corridor, only to discover that the hallway cameras had captured nothing at all. Paranormal investigators have flocked to Napa State Hospital over the years, determined to document its eerie reputation. Many left with chilling evidence: unexplained EVPs, sudden battery drains, and equipment interference. One team claimed to capture a clear recording of a voice whispering the word "help" inside a locked ward. Another described hearing faint screaming echoing from the morgue long after it had been abandoned. But Napa's legends are not confined to ghost stories alone. There have been tales of darker, more oppressive presences lurking in the shadows. Some visitors reported being overcome by sudden nausea, dizziness, or intense feelings of dread when walking through certain areas. A few even claimed to feel unseen hands pushing them or brushing against their arms. The cemetery remains the most unnerving part of the grounds. Thousands of patients lie there, their resting places unmarked, their stories untold. Those who visit describe feeling watched, and many leave small offerings, flowers, coins, or prayers to honor the forgotten souls. Some have heard whispers drifting through the trees, voices calling faintly from the earth itself. Modern Napa State Hospital still operates as a psychiatric facility, but much of the old campus has been shuttered. The history, however, cannot be erased. Current staff occasionally whisper about their own unsettling encounters. One guard swore he saw a patient standing at a gate long after visiting hours had ended, only to realize no such patient existed. The sheer scale of Napa's suffering has made it one of the most infamous institutions in California. For over a century, its halls bore witness to pain, despair, and death. And even as time passes, the echoes remain. The weeping woman, the restrained man, the voices that plead for help. Each is a reminder that history's scars do not fade easily. To stand in Napa State Hospital is to stand amid the weight of thousands of forgotten lives. And for those who believe in the paranormal, it is one of the clearest places where the past refuses to die. We have now reached the threshold of the final and most terrifying hospital of all. Number 1 is not just haunted, it is legendary. Its dark history, chilling encounters, and overwhelming atmosphere have made it the most feared medical institution in California. Stay with me as we step into the shadows of the state's most haunted hospital. Number 1. Agnew's Insane Asylum, Santa Clara. At the very top of our list stands a place so steeped in tragedy and darkness that it has earned its reputation as California's most haunted hospital, Agnew's Insane Asylum. Also known as Agnew State Hospital, it opened in 1885, a sprawling psychiatric institution in Santa Clara. Its red brick buildings rose against the California sky, promising compassion and care for the mentally ill. But behind its walls, a far darker story unfolded. The asylum was designed in the Kirkbride style, vast wings, towering wards, and endless corridors. It was built to hold around 200 patients, but like many institutions of its time, it soon became overcrowded. Patients lived in cramped quarters, many subjected to harsh treatments. Whispers of abuse, neglect, and inhumane practices were common, though rarely documented in official reports. The greatest tragedy struck in 1906, when the San Francisco earthquake tore through Northern California. Agnew's asylum collapsed in the destruction. Entire wards crumbled, trapping patients and staff inside. More than 100 people, men, women, and children, lost their lives within minutes. Some were crushed beneath falling stone. Others burned in the fires that followed. The survivors spoke of screams echoing through the ruins, of desperate hands clawing at debris, of loved ones buried alive. That disaster alone was enough to brand Agnew's as cursed ground, and it was only the beginning. The asylum was rebuilt and expanded, reopening years later with even larger facilities. But the tragedies continued. Patients endured electroshock therapy, ice baths, and lobotomies. Stories of mistreatment circulated, patients restrained for days or used in questionable medical experiments. For many, Agnew's became not a place of healing, but a prison of torment. It is here, amid this layered history of trauma, that hauntings have thrived. For over a century, countless witnesses have reported chilling experiences on the grounds of Agnew's. Apparitions of patients have been seen wandering the ruins, their faces vacant, their cries faint in the night. Voices whisper through the empty corridors, speaking words no living soul can understand. One of the most persistent legends is that of the crying woman. She is said to roam the old asylum grounds, dressed in tattered clothing, her sobs echoing in the darkness. Some believe she lost her children in the 1906 earthquake and now wanders eternally in search of them. Visitors who have seen her describe overwhelming feelings of grief and despair, as though her sorrow seeps into their very bones. Another chilling account comes from construction workers who later redeveloped part of the asylum grounds. They reported hearing screams erupting from sealed-off tunnels beneath the site. Others claimed to see fleeting figures darting through the corner of their vision, only to vanish into thin air. One worker swore he felt a hand grip his shoulder so tightly he stumbled forward, but when he turned, no one was there. The morgue, once used to house the countless dead from the earthquake and later patient deaths, is said to be the most haunted of all. Those who dare to enter describe hearing the sound of drawers sliding open, as though unseen attendants still work among the dead. Some investigators reported seeing body-shaped impressions appear briefly on gurneys, only to fade away before their eyes. Over the years, paranormal teams have documented extraordinary evidence at Agnew's. Disembodied voices captured on recorders, orbs of light drifting through abandoned rooms, and cold spots so severe they left frost on investigators' equipment. Some teams even claim to see full-bodied apparitions, men in hospital gowns, women in restraints, children peering silently from corners. But perhaps the most unsettling element of Agnews is not what is seen, but what is felt. Visitors speak of an oppressive weight that presses down on them, a suffocating energy that grows stronger the deeper they move into the grounds. Many leave shaken, convinced they encountered something they cannot explain. Though much of the old asylum has been demolished or repurposed, its legacy lingers. Modern developments stand on the site today, but residents and workers still whisper of strange activity. Flickering lights, phantom footsteps in empty rooms, and the chilling sound of weeping drifting through the night. The land itself seems unwilling to forget. Agnews Insane Asylum is more than just a haunted hospital. It is a place where tragedy piled upon tragedy, where lives were lost in fire, stone, and neglect. Its haunted reputation is not built on a single ghost story, but on the combined weight of human suffering that soaked into its walls and earth. For those who believe Agnews is the very embodiment of California's haunted past, and for skeptics, even they cannot deny the chilling history that gives rise to its legends. To stand where Agnews once loomed is to stand on haunted ground, a place where the dead still walk, where sorrow still lingers, and where the past refuses to rest. With Agnews at the top of our list, our journey through California's haunted hospitals nears its end. But the shadows we've uncovered are not so easily left behind. From forgotten asylums to decaying wards, each site carries echoes of pain, loss, and restless spirits. And as you leave these stories behind tonight, remember, some doors, once opened, are not so easily closed. Our journey has taken us deep into the heart of California's darkest medical history. We've walked the endless corridors of abandoned asylums, listened to the whispers in forgotten wards, and felt the weight of tragedy pressing from the walls of hospitals long left behind. Each site carried its own story, its own shadows, its own restless spirits. From the cries of lost children at Pacific State Hospital, to the ghostly nuns of Queen of Angels, to the chilling apparitions of Linda Vista, every place revealed another layer of terror. Napa State Hospital's sorrowful cemetery and the devastation of Agnews Asylum's earthquake tragedy reminded us that behind every haunting lies real human suffering. The ghosts we speak of are not just legends. They are echoes of real lives, men, women, and children whose stories ended within those walls. But now, as we step back from the darkness, we are left with one haunting question. Do the dead truly linger among us? Or are these stories only reflections of our own fears? For some, these tales are entertainment, chilling folklore told under the cover of night. But for those who have stood inside these hospitals, who have felt the breath of something unseen on their skin, who have heard the voices when no one was there, these stories are far more than myth. They are reminders that history leaves scars, and some scars never fade. So now I ask you, which of these hospitals chilled you the most? Was it the restless spirits of Linda Vista, forever replaying their final days? The lost souls of Napa, buried in unmarked graves? Or the crushing tragedy of Agnews, where an earthquake turned a hospital into a tomb? Leave your answer in the comments below. Share your own stories, your own experiences, because California's haunted history is not yet finished. And perhaps your voice will join the chorus of others who have felt the chill of the unknown. If you found yourself captivated by these tales, don't forget to subscribe to Vanguard Vault. We will continue this journey across the country, uncovering the most haunted hospitals, asylums, and medical institutions in every state. The next chapter awaits, and trust me, you will not want to miss the horrors that lie beyond California. Be sure to explore our Haunted Hospitals playlist, where you can revisit other stories of tragedy and spirits that refuse to rest. Each video peels back another layer of America's haunted past, guiding you deeper into the shadows. Before we part tonight, let me leave you with this thought. A hospital is supposed to be a place of healing, a sanctuary where life is preserved and restored. But history has shown us that even these halls of hope can become prisons of despair. And sometimes, when the suffering is too great, when the pain is too deep, the spirits of the lost remain, forever pacing the wards, forever whispering in the night. As you turn off the lights this evening, remember the stories you've heard. Remember the figures that walk the halls of California's most haunted hospitals. And should you ever find yourself near one of these sites, Listen closely. The silence may not be silence at all. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadows. This has been Vanguard Vault. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and never stop watching the darkness.